From the field to the film room to the war room, we've got you covered every step of the way as the road to the draft starts right now. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Armchair Scouts. I'm your host, Shane Haff. You can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL. And I'm joined today by my co-host and fellow draft enthusiast, Dives. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mr. Crockpot. Be sure to check out his podcast, Party on Broad. Dives, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. After Abdul Carter, this position's all over the place. The variance of a lot of these guys, boomer bust, tools, guys that have a lot of production but not a lot of tools. I mean, it's just kind of a pick your poison kind of group. So I'm excited to see how you guys rank compared to mine.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are going to dive into that edge rusher class. But before we do, also joined by my co-host on Chalk Talk, Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. _ Be sure to check out his Tough Cover radio show every Saturday. Mark, how are you doing?
I've got comps ready to go this week. I'm not flying naked with no NFL comparisons on these guys to throw out. I've been working on that for our draft guide eventually over the last couple weeks. So I'm excited to drop some of them.
All right. It is officially draft season when Mark has his comps ready. And this is going to be a double episode week of the Armchair Scouts with us. We had to miss last week. And so we're doing top 10 edge rushers tonight. And then tomorrow night, we're going to do top 5 linebackers. So a lot of draft content coming your way this week. And guys, I got to tell you up front, as I started watching edge rushers, I expected to be wowed by this class from things I had seen on Twitter and the way people kind of talked about it. And I was very underwhelmed by this class personally. So we're going to get into it. I'll talk through my disappointment and we'll see how everybody stacks up. But as always, we're going to go, well, not always. This is the first 10 round we're doing, but we're going to go from 10 to 1. And so, Dives, why don't you lead us off with your number 10? Talk to me about Braden Swinson.
I'm going to try and go fast on this because we have a lot of guys to talk about here. But Braden Swinson, I think, is one of the more underrated prospects in this draft and a near pitch perfect fit for Vic Fangio's defense. His numbers last year were outstanding. 22% pass rush win rate. That was 10th best among all FBS edge defenders. He had 60 pressures. That was tied with Donovan Ezeraku, who we'll be talking a lot about tonight. And that was 6th best in the FBS. He's got an explosive first step. He's a guy that can set an edge immediately from day one. Against the run, he had 13 tackles for loss. He's 6'4", 250. And one of his outstanding traits is his explosiveness, his ability to win from speed to power. This guy, when he puts all the tools together, his tape is elite. He's got length. He's got upper body strength. And there was a little bit of a disappointment. Not a disappointment per se, but he didn't do all the drills at the combine. But the drills he did, he was 8+ RES score for the 3-cone drill and the short shuttle. I think he needs to improve on his pass rush plan. I think he needs to add counters. Doesn't have elite flexibility off the edge. But overall, if you're looking for a big edge rusher, if you're looking for a guy in a scenario where the Eagles maybe trade out of 32 and go into that second round, I think Braden Swinson's a perfect fit for the Birds and definitely worthy of your attention.
All right. Mark, he didn't make your top 10. He also wasn't in my top 10. Is there anything you want to add in on Swinson?
No, like Dodge said, a lot of guys to get to, so I'll keep it brief.
All right. Same for me. We'll just keep the show rolling along here. So, Mark, let's get to your number 10. He's number 8 for me, and he's actually all the way up at number 4 for Dives. It's Mykel Williams. Talk to me about Mykel Williams, and I'm a lot closer to you than I am to Dives on him. I was expecting to be wowed based on what I'd seen people say about Williams, and I just wasn't. But I'll throw it to you. Ball's in your court. What did you think of Williams?
Yeah, I think this is a guy who kind of looks better on the RAS chart than on the football field, I guess. If you're looking at it like that, I guess he doesn't have a RAS score because he didn't bench. But it looked good in terms of the size and ran a good 40. But so you still can get the comps on RAS football. And he's got some good like old school ones. Jared Allen, from obviously just got in the Hall of Fame. Justin Tuck, and the one that I went with, and a name that I kind of forgot was Ziggy Ansah. I would say a poor man Ziggy Ansah, but he kind of does project directly athletically as Ziggy Ansah, who played probably about a decade ago. But Michael Williams, I think I probably have him a little too low. I have him about 50 overall. He's my number 10 edge. I think there's an argument to be made that maybe I could bump him above a guy or two on my edge rankings, and probably about 5 or 6 guys on my overall rankings. I've grouped him together a lot with Shamar Stewart as kind of the projectable guys who maybe don't have as much production as some of these other guys, but he has had 17 sacks here, according to sack numbers on PFF, as opposed to other sites are completely different sometimes. But according to PFF, he had 17 sacks over the last 3 years. So he's not Shamar Stewart, where there's absolutely nothing to grab onto in terms of football on the field tape and, outside of just hoping and projecting. Michael Williams is better than that. But I do think that you're still doing a lot of projecting here with Williams, and there's still a lot that would need to be refined. But I don't think he's a complete project and a complete zero the way that I think Shamar Stewart is kind of coming in.
Yeah. So it's 14 sacks over the last 3 years from traditional charting. The reason PFF doesn't give half sacks, like if it's 2 guys splitting a sack, they'll give both guys the full sack. It's just you sacked him or you didn't.
But then I guess that makes sense. Never mind. That makes sense.
So that's why the numbers don't sometimes add up. But Michael Williams, he's got a freakish build, right? But he's got injury history. He missed time in 2023 with foot surgery. He missed time in 2024 with an ankle sprain. And we know how the Georgia front is, but he never played more than 410 snaps in a season. And I kind of just think he has a subpar get off of the line of scrimmage. And so I don't know. I mean, he doesn't have a lot of snaps under his belt, so there's a lot of room for refinement and growth. He is not even going to be 21 years old on draft night, but he's maybe he's got a high ceiling, but I definitely think he's also got a pretty low floor. So, Dibes, you're quite a bit higher on him. What are your thoughts on Michael Williams?
Yeah, it's the traits. It's the upside. We're going to be saying this a lot tonight. He's got a lot of versatility, played a lot of different spots on that Georgia line. He can beat interior defensive tackles. He can beat guys with speed on the edge, but you're drafting this guy with what he can be down the road. And that's kind of, like I said at the beginning of the show, after you get past Abdul Carter, I think scheme fit and getting the right guy to fit and put him in position to succeed is going to be vital. I like Michael Williams. I agree. I was a little shocked at his explosiveness. I thought he would have tested better, quite frankly, but I still like him. If he's there at 32, I would draft him for sure. And I think there's some people that are out on him. But as a guy with traits, as a guy that fits that Georgia Bulldog state of mind, like the Philadelphia Eagles, I would roll the dice.
I forgot to mention, so I went and gathered the stats on the top 16 edge rushers in the class, and Michael Williams ranked 15th out of 16 in pressure rate, 12th in sack rate, and 11th in defensive stop rate. So just a few metrics there for him. So let's go over to my number 10. I have at number 10 a guy that Mark has at 8. Dibes have him at 9, so we're all kind of in the same vicinity here. It's Donovan Ezeraku out of Boston College. He was a 3-star recruit who played tight end / wide receiver and edge rusher in high school, played in 10 games as a true freshman before becoming a full-time starter in 2022 and leading the team in sacks and tackles for loss. He's 21 and a half years old, 6'2" and 4/8", 248 pounds, which is pretty undersized for an edge rusher, but we'll get into that. Has a 7.98 relative athletic score, 10th in pressure rate, 6th in sack rate, and 7th in stop rate. And he had 16 and a half sacks in 2024, which was his breakout year, of course. So when you watch him, I think he's got a lot of tools in the tool bag as a pass rusher, and he uses them pretty well. in conjunction with his ability to bend the edge. He's very put together as a pass rusher. And then in the run game, he's disruptive as a gap shooter. Like, he can diagnose quickly and he can beat you to the spot. But the flip side to that is he leaves his gap early and trying to penetrate, and that can cause problems in the run game at times. And he does that a lot because he is small and he can't really anchor against offensive line. And you kind of know what you're getting in the run game, but I do worry that in the NFL and the pass game that he may struggle against tackles that are able to outreach him and jolt him off his rush plans with their initial punch. He lacks the ability to convert speed to power and collapse pockets through a tackle's chest. And then he just doesn't have the best burst off the line at times. His overall quickness isn't as good as what you would hope for a guy his size. So I gave him a second round grade. I think he's a stand-up pass rush specialist, and he's just going to have to add weight to have a chance to thrive as a 3-down player in the NFL. So that's Donovan Ezeraku. Do either of you guys want to chime in anything that I missed on him?
I like him a lot as a day 2 guy. I think he's got good arm length. I think he tested really well in the 3-and-cone and the short shuttle, and he's a very good athlete. He's not an elite athlete, but I think where he is in the areas that matter. So I like Ezeraku and his fit with the Birds quite a bit, and definitely one of my more preferred day 2 choices.
Surprised I'm the highest on a 6'2", 6'3" guy coming off the edge, but I think he's got great bend around the edge. So I actually think he kind of uses his size to his benefit at times. But yeah, there's definitely a lack of power there. And a lack of speed to power with just his size. It's pretty obvious. But guy who he's a little lighter than this guy, but pretty similar, I think, in play style is Harold Landry, who just moved teams again, and actually a little younger than I thought. I feel like Harold Landry's been around forever. He was only drafted in 2018. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good comp there as a kind of a stand-up pass rusher specialist.
All right. Well, let's keep rolling. We'll go to my number 9 because Dive's number 9 was Ezeraku, and we'll talk about Mark's number 9 in a little bit. My number 9 is Shamar Stewart. Speaking of athleticism, Shamar Stewart blew up the combine. He got a 10.0 relative athletic score, so the most athletic according to the scale that's ever tested. He's 6'5", 267. Ran a 4.59 40, had a 40-inch vertical jump. Both were above 95th percentile. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. He was actually a top 10 recruit in the 2022 class, and he played in all 12 games as a true freshman. And then he saw his snap count cut almost in half in 2023 before it bumped back up in 2024. He'll be 21 and a half years old on draft night. He ranked 12th in pressure rate, 16th, which is last in sack rate, and 16th, which again is last in defensive stop rate. In his entire collegiate career, he's got 4.5 sacks. And this is a guy that they're talking about as a top 10 pick because of his athleticism. And I think that's absurd. I've heard people talk about him going top 10, and I don't see it. I've heard people wishful thinking he would be there at 32 for the Eagles, and I wouldn't take him if he was on the board at 32. I just don't see it in the first round with him. He does have elite athleticism and length, and he combines explosiveness off the line with power and the fluidity of movement. And he has those things, those traits that you can't teach. He can run plays down from the backside, especially if he's left unblocked. He creates knockback at the initial engagement in the run game. He's got heavy hands, good strength at the point of attack. He anchors well, but he just doesn't have the most explosive first step. And his pad levels get too high in the run game too, and so that hurts his anchor. He's got poor timing in his pass rush moves, his counter moves. They're not very effective. He misses out on a lot of plays because he gets off balance at the tackle point. He misses a ton of tackles. He has a 27% missed tackle rate in his career. And again, he's only got 4.5 sacks in 3 years of collegiate play. This just isn't a guy that you take high in the first round. I put a second round grade on him for the athleticism. He's a tweener, edge, interior defensive line player who he can be impactful as a run defender, but he is a major project with a lot of athletic upside, but he's a major project as a pass rusher, and he is going to be dramatically overdrafted. I've heard the Nolan Smith comp. I hope this isn't who Mark was going to comp him to, because this is not Nolan Smith. Nolan Smith had an 18.6% pressure rate. Shamar Stewart has 12.4. Nolan Smith had a 1.9% sack rate. It's quadruple the sack rate of Shamar Stewart. He had a 7.9% stop rate that is triple Shamar Stewart's. And people thought that Nolan Smith was a project as a pass rusher coming out. He went 30th overall. That's more in the range of where this guy should be drafted, in my opinion.
He reminds me so much, so much of a guy that Shane and I hated a very long time ago who went first overall in Trayvon Walker.
Yeah,
I think that there's so many similarities with Trayvon Walker to him. So that's my comp there. Definitely not Nolan Smith. That would be disrespectful to my guy Nolan. And I will say, I think Trayvon Walker has turned himself into a pretty good player. I don't really see that for Shamar Stewart. So I'm kind of talking about the prospect version of Walker and maybe the first 2 years, and maybe not as much this year, where I do think Walker took some steps there. He's definitely not a guy that I would be on my board in terms of in the first round for sure.
All right, Dibes, you're a little higher on him. He's number 6 on your board. So,
I'm sorry. Before I yield my time here, can you share that screen that I shared here? I forgot here because it disappears for me.
Does the gentleman on the floor yield?
Yes. Okay. Yes. This tweet pisses me off. Daniel Jeremiah tweeted this at the combine, I remember, with Myles Garrett and Shamar Stewart, and how exactly similar the statistical profiles were. And there's other tweets that even take it further than that.
At least he listed the college sacks at the bottom, 32.5 versus 4.5.
Yeah, I'd say that's a stark difference when you have twice as many sacks in every year that you played in college as Stewart had in all of his years combined in college. So I think that's probably where that comparison ends.
Yeah. All right.
Dumb tweet, Daniel.
Does the gentleman in the Phillies hat yield?
I yield.
Okay. Dibes, anything you want to throw in on Shamar Stewart? You're a little higher on him than we are.
I mean, obviously the tools, I was really high on Trey Walker. I remember that. And I expected him to blow up during the combine process, and sure enough, he did. And I talked about Shamar Stewart on previous shows months ago about the combine and him kind of being like Trey Walker. I do expect him to be a first-round pick, but he is a much bigger boomer bust pick, in my opinion, than Trey Walker was. Shamar Stewart, I think, also has some defensive tackle in him, especially if he were taken by the Philadelphia Eagles. He is a mold of clay, kind of like Michael Williams, where he is so raw. Technical-wise, he's got so far to go. But if he goes to the right scheme and maybe gets growed into like a Fletcher Cox type of thing, I could probably be sold as like a second or third round pick. But yeah, I fully agree in being overdrafted. Whereas, was Trey Walker overdrafted? Absolutely. His rise was wild that year. But the Shamar Stewart thing is getting out of control.
Yeah. If you're a pass rusher with less than 5 sacks, I'm not interested in you in the first round.
I don't think he can drop back in coverage at all. I would never put him in that situation. But as a guy that can slowly grow on the interior, there could be upside there. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. But I think that this is just like a classic example of a guy I'm always out on, which is the guy who tears up the combine, who looks like, it's Tarzan on the combine, Jane on the field. And then you come out and you also are a tweener. And I don't know. I think he's probably just like right in between in terms of being an edge and being a D tackle, which to me kind of makes you like a, jack of all trades, master of none situation. And I would just want a guy who's a bit more specialized, either, with experience on the interior or kind of feeling better about their chances at sticking at edge.
Yeah. Probably makes you a 3-4 defensive end, if we're being honest. But
Yeah.
All right, well, let's keep rolling. We will go to number 8. Dives has Princely Uman at 8. Mark and I both have him at number 4. So Dives, we'll give you first shot at Princely here.
Sorry, I think Mark, this is your boy, right? I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure.
I do like Princely a lot.
Yeah, Princely Uman is fun. Like, if you were to put a gun to my head and say, what's the difference between Princely Uman and some of these other guys, I probably couldn't give you a straight answer. He's got really good size, 6'5", 256, good versatility. He played both stand-up outside linebacker and from a three-point stance in line. He's solid. I'd say boomer bust in terms of run defense, but a lot of upside. Needs to improve his strength at the next level. Didn't have a great combine. Another guy that I was shocked didn't show as well as I thought he would. 4.72 in the 40, a 7.33 in the 3-cone, raw athletic score of 8.58 out of 10. Not the most explosive guy. Obviously, a far from finished product when it comes to technique. There are more concerns than positives, I think, with Princely. He needs to improve his play strength and pass rush moveset. He can set an edge at times, but he also at times plays too upright. The flashes are there, especially when he comes off the line of scrimmage, but you just need to see it more consistently. I think for the Eagles, he'd be a stand-up outside linebacker, huge upside guy. Another guy on day 2 I could definitely go all in on. Mark, what do you think?
I love this guy. I don't necessarily know about his fit with the Eagles. I do think you could figure out ways to make it work for sure. But I love this guy. He's got such a quick first step. He's really just great bend around the edge, great kind of body control, flexibility. I think he has I think I'm just higher on everything he does than like the general consensus. Like I'm higher on the pass rush bag a little bit. Like I think he's got a little more to him as a pass rusher, some good hesitation moves to kind of use his size to his advantage. Like I just think that he's got a lot in that pass rush bag. I'm higher on him sticking as a run defender. I've seen, there's some scouting reports out there that are basically saying like, oh, don't count on being a run defender. He graded out pretty good as a run defender. And Dives, in terms of the combine, it seems like he did mostly pretty well. If you look at it, he just didn't do great in the shuttle and the 3-cone. That's really weighing him down there to an 8.9 for me. But he did great in the vertical, did great in the broad jump, and still like 8+ in each of these speed drills. So I think he still showed his explosiveness, and I think this is probably a lofty comp. And there's a lot of poor man's before some of these comps in this edge show, but I do think that there's some Brian Burns there that you can kind of, if you're saying the peak of the comp, that's definitely like a peak comp. But I don't think if you told me his career worked out perfectly and he turned into Brian Burns, it wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, I think he's got. He does a good job of like slapping away punches from offensive tackles. Has really good closing speed. I don't think he's useless in the run game. He can set the edge, but he struggles to shed or to create knockback, which is what's ideal for you. And I think a lot of what you were saying about his shuttle and stuff not being good makes perfect sense because he's a long strider, which kind of hampers that twitchiness, that lateral agility. He's got a high pad level. I gave him a 2nd-round grade too. I said I think he's a stand-up edge rusher that I designated pass rusher early in his career, but I do think he has the ability to be a 3-down player. I just don't think it's going to be his best usage right out of the gate his rookie season.
Yeah, I generally agree with that. But again, like the reason that he's a 1st-round grade for me is because I do have the hopes for that 3-down player. And even if it's not right away, we've seen how many guys the Eagles have eased in on the defensive line. But I do think eventually he's a 3-down guy.
All right. That is Princely Uman. Let's go to a guy that is number 7 for both Mark and I. He's all the way up at number 2 for Dives. Buckle up. Get ready to hear us fight about Nick Scorton out of Texas A&M. Mark, I'll let you fire the opening salvo here.
He's a little bit in the same boat as Shamar and Michael Williams, I think, where it's mostly traits, mostly kind of size that you're going for than anything on the field. But I think that there's more to grasp onto with Scorton than with Williams or a Shamar Stewart. He's had the same pretty much the same pressure rate the last 2 years. So he may have had double the amount of sacks 2 years ago as he had last year. But I generally think he's pretty much been the same pass rusher over the last 2 years. And I think there's a lot more to him as a pass rusher as opposed to guys like Williams or Stewart. I think he's probably pretty versatile in terms of the kind of defense he could play on. Like, I think you could probably fit him as a 3-4 end and also as a 4-3 end. That's definitely a positive. I did think he was better in 2023 than 2024. I mean, coming into the year, Dives can speak better to this than me, but he was kind of like a potential top 5, top 10 pick. I felt like coming into the year, and I don't think he ever took his game to that kind of that next level that people were hoping for and expecting him to kind of cement himself in that top 5 to 10. But he's a fringe. He's a high second round grade for me. I see the vision more with Scorton than with Williams or Stewart.
All right. Yeah, he is 14th in pressure rate, 15th in sack rate, and 12th in stop rate. So wasn't particularly productive in 2024. I do think he's got a lot of tools in the tool chest as a pass rusher. Got a lot of counter moves. He's got a nice inside spin move. He's a high motor player, but he fails to threaten with his first step, which weakens all of those inside counter moves. It also weakens his speed to power move. And he's not the most bendy guy around the edge. I gave him a second round grade. I said he's a hybrid defensive end, kind of like Mark was saying. And I actually think he's better as a run defender than a pass rusher right now, just because of that get off and that lack of bend. But Dives, this is your guy. You're pretty high on Scorton. He's up at number 2 for you. So what do you like about Nick Scorton so much?
You guys touched on it. Definitely right there with what Mark's saying, especially with Shamar Stewart. Like, he's definitely a tweener, and for better or worse. There's some Brandon Graham in his game, I think, that really makes me interested. A guy that could, like you said, be a solid run defender to start. That's how they use Brandon Graham in certain situations. He would kick inside, and I think that's Nick Scorton to a T. I think he's versatile. I am concerned about his explosiveness for sure, but absolutely on the top of the list of a boomer bust type of prospect that can't just find his role in the NFL. I've been one of Nick Scorton's biggest fans all year, not going off that hill. So, yeah, I'm probably higher on him than a lot of people, but I do think at the end of the day, he's got a lot of tools, like you said, Shane.
All right. Before we move on, I just realized I forgot to give the pressure rates and stuff for Princely. So Princely Uman Mielen was 3rd in pressure rate, 4th in sack rate, and 6th in defensive stop rate. I'll try to remember to throw those out. I keep forgetting, but
by the way, my comp that I forgot to throw it out on Scorton was Melvin Ingram. That was a pretty direct comp right there. I was surprised that Scorton was so small when he graded out at the combine, 6'2.5", and I just X'd out of it. But I forget, I didn't have the weight as low as it was in my notes.
6'2" and 6'8", which is 35th percentile, 257, which is 45th percentile.
It's pretty light. Yeah, it's pretty small. It's pretty light. I would have guessed like 6'4", 270, but yeah, he's definitely a little smaller than I had in my notes.
All right, well, let's go to a guy that is not small, which therefore means Mark is very high on him. It's Landon Jackson, edge rusher out of Arkansas. He's number 7 for Dives, number 6 for me, and number 3 for Mark. Dives lead off with Landon Jackson.
Landon Jackson. Mark, I'm sorry I'm taking all your boys because you've been talking about him since 12 months ago. But anyway, here he is. This guy is massive, as we all know. 6'7", 280 pounds. He's a guy that plays with explosiveness, plays with violence, The Razorbacks lined him anywhere, 0 tech, 3 tech, 5 tech, inside, outside, left side, right side, outside, inside linebacker, you name it. This guy was everywhere for that Razorback defense. His biggest question mark is the consistency in his technique. He's a tall prospect. There are times when he'll lose leverage, and we saw that at the Senior Bowl. There are minutes where he was winning reps and looking like the best player on the field, and then he just kind of gets beat. And you're like, what just happened? That's kind of where he's at. That's kind of summarizes his time at Arkansas as well. There were games where he completely dominated in the biggest games of his career against top-notch competition. Then there were games where he didn't do that much. As a pass rusher, he kind of looks a step behind when changing direction. Doesn't have a lot of bend. Hips are a little tight. But similar to James Pierce, man, you're looking at a guy that tested phenomenally well at the combine, a 40-yard dash of 4.68, 40-plus inch vertical, nearly broke the 11-foot mark at the broad jump. To put that in perspective, only 3 defensive linemen in combine history have ever cleared 40 inches in the vert while weighing over 260 pounds. That list includes Myles Garrett, Mario Williams, and Shamar Stewart. A 9.88 raw athletic score, inconsistent on tape, but my gosh, the size, the length. Like, I would love the Eagles to get size on the edge, and it doesn't get any bigger than Landon Jackson.
Yeah, he was 16th, so he was last out of this crew in pressure rate, 13th in sack rate, 8th in defensive stop rate. I mean, he's a monster. That's why Mark loves him so much. He knows how to use his reach to deconstruct blocks. He's got heavy hands in the run game, a strong anchor, active hands as a pass rusher. I think he's got a nice cross chop move, but my concern for him is that I worry he's close to maxed out as a pass rusher because I think his limitations are more athletic than technical. Like, I feel like he's fairly well technically refined, but he doesn't bend the edge well, and he's not very twitchy. Doesn't have the quickest get off. And so I worry what his ceiling is as a pass rusher based off of that. So I gave him a 2nd-round grade. I think I said he's a scheme diverse early down run defender that has a low ceiling as a pass rusher. Mark, are you projecting Landon Jackson to be a better pass rusher than that? I'm assuming you are based on how you've got him a little higher. What do you think his ceiling is as a pass rusher?
Yeah, and again, I feel like I'm attracted to these guys who are on teams where they're the only NFL player drafted on the defensive line, and I think so much focus had to go towards Landon Jackson from other offensive lines, and I can't imagine that Arkansas had him in like an NFL program kind of refining his techniques a little bit there. So I think if he went to like a good D-line coach, good defensive coordinator that can kind of put him in the system, I think he's right away going to be an elite edge rusher in terms of stopping the run at the next level. And I think there's more there as a pass rusher that I'm willing to project forward. And you look at the RAS score and you look at, I think that, like you said, he does have some moves and uses his arms well, active hands. Like, I think that there is some stuff that you can grab onto and project forward. And because I think he's such an elite rush defender, I think it gives him a really high floor to at least start out with. So I think there's a lot of Clowney to his game. And obviously Clowney went 1 overall and was an incredible prospect and probably had a pretty disappointing career and probably never became the pass rusher people wanted him to be. He was an elite run defender, and that alone, he was making how many times in a row did he get like 1 year, $20 million from a new team? So clearly people valued Clowney in the league, and I think Jackson is going to be kind of like a carbon copy.
All right, so that is Landon Jackson, 7 for Dibe, 6 for me, number 3 for Mark. So Mark, let's throw it to you next. Talk to me about JT Tuimoloau. He's number 6 for you. He's number 5 for me. And he is outside Dibes' top 10. So talk to me about JTT.
I think in general, people are a little too low on both of the Ohio State guys coming out, and neither are going to, knock your socks off when it comes to athletically or the traits, but both have been incredibly productive. I think that JTT is a pretty strong lock to be a solid player. Maybe this isn't the highest ceiling draft pick, I'd say, but I think that the production and the size that he gives you, and I think he's going to be a 4-3 defensive end, but I think that I don't see a ton of scenarios where he doesn't stick. I mean, he graded out as one of the best run defenders at the edge rusher position last year, had 15 sacks, pretty good hurry rate over the last 2 years. So JTT's a guy. This is actually one of the only guys in my top 50 I don't have a comp for. Haven't found it yet. But I'm a little higher on JTT in general than consensus.
All right. JTT was 9th in pressure rate, 2nd in sack rate, and 5th in stop rate. I gave him a 2nd round grade as well. I said I think he's an even front D end with 3-down playability due to run defense, but he has a questionable ceiling as a pure pass rusher. And so I'm a little higher on him as a pass rusher than Landon Jackson. I think they're both really good run defenders, and I think they're a little more works in progress against in the passing game. I will say one of the things that really stuck out to me is his football IQ. Like specifically, he retraces against screens so well, and he gets his hand up in the passing window on quick passes. He got his hand on several passes, 10 pass breakups over his career at Ohio State. So I do think that's noteworthy as well. Dibes, you didn't have him in your top 10 at all. Anything you want to add in on JTT?
Just that he's so damn inconsistent. He's another one of those guys. When it's clicking, he looks like the best player on the field. I mean, we're talking multiple touchdowns. We're talking 2-3 sacks. We're talking a pick. He's everywhere. And then there are games where he doesn't do much. There's just been way too many flashes of that and then not. So that's always been my take. And he's played his biggest moments has been against really good competition. I've just been kind of waiting for him to become dominant, and he never really truly did.
All right. Well, let's keep rolling then. We're going to go to Jack Sawyer, who is number 5 on Mark's board. And he is outside the top 10 for both Dibes and I. So, Mark, go ahead and talk to us about Jack Sawyer.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who made, I think he helped himself out with his draft stock down the stretch in that college football playoff run for Ohio State. He was so good those last couple games. Obviously against, I believe it was Texas, he had I don't know if it was an interception or a forced fumble that he returned all the way for a touchdown, but he also had 7 passes deflected in the college football playoff in those 4 games. He had 4.5 sacks in those 4 games, 5 tackles for loss. He showed up at the biggest time of his career after the biggest loss of his career against Michigan, and he went pretty viral for that, kind of crying on the field about them sticking the flag at the 50-yard line. But after that, it clearly motivated him to be an absolute monster down the stretch, and kind of the biggest stretch of his career there at Ohio State. But 18 sacks over the last 2 years. I think that this, again, like JTT, a high floor guy. Maybe his ceiling isn't quite as high as you'd want, an edge rusher that you're taking maybe late first, early second to be. The comp to him would be Sam Hubbard from the Bengals. I think he's going to be a solid player who is able to kind of. I think he's another guy who's 3-down guy though. Yeah,
I said he's a high floor, low ceiling guy in my opinion. I like him as an early down rotational player. He's good in the run game, diagnoses blocks well, attacks, good hand placement. My favorite note on his scouting report, because I moved it back and forth several times, because I do a strengths and a weaknesses, and I wrote modest athlete with modest tools. And then I moved that back and forth from a strength to a weakness multiple times before just asking the question, is that a positive or a negative? I don't know. I guess it depends on where you view him. I gave him a 3rd round grade. I think he fits best as like an even front defensive end. And I guess, like you said, I mean, high floor. I just don't think the ceiling is very high on Jack Sawyer. So,
all
right.
I've been out on Jack Sawyer for a while. Ryan Reese, that's his guy. I've called him overrated for a long time, and he made me look like an idiot because he had some big moments this year in the college football playoffs. So shout out to him.
And he was, by the way, because I was going to forget, 6th in pressure rate, 10th in sack rate, and 10th in stop rate in 2024. So, okay, that brings us all the way up to our number 3s now. And Dibes at number 3 has James Pierce Jr., who Mark and I both have at number 2. I'm just going to say these up front so I don't forget. He was 1st in pressure rate, 8th in sack rate, 3rd in defensive stop rate in 2024. Dibes, talk to us about James Pierce Jr.
James Pierce Jr., Mark's boy, yet again, 6'5", 242-pound blur coming off the edge. He's a guy that has elite tools, just needs some, seasoning, NFL coaching to kind of unlock his upside. A lot like our probably unanimous number 1. Inconsistent as a run defender. He can improve at setting an edge, especially when the run's coming at him. He's got a lean frame, could definitely, gain some bulk, improve at winning the point of attack. But, man, the upside is outrageous. He was one of the biggest winners at the scouting combine, hit 23 miles per hour on the GPS on a pick 6 against Iowa as a sophomore. He ran a 4.47 40-yard dash. He tied the fastest 10-yard split time at 1.58, and man, he's just got so much tools. There's some negativity out there regarding his character. Apparently, didn't interview very well. Take that for what it's worth. But if he's sitting there for pick 32 and the Eagles are on the clock, I think the Eagles need to definitely think long and hard about that one. Because in terms of explosiveness, athleticism, traits, he's got a lot of it.
Yeah, he's got elite explosiveness with his first step. He's able to stress offensive tackles and their ability to gain depth quickly enough to match his pace. And then he couples that with an elite bend around the edge. And so he's always threatening the outside shoulder. He's got good lateral agility, so he was used as a looper on stunts at times. I think he's got a decent speed to power move despite his lack of mass, which is a concern. Like, he's very underweight, 91st percentile height, but only 17th percentile weight. So he needs to add some mass, and he struggles to hold the point of attack in the run game because of his size. He also just doesn't recognize blocks super great. His hand timing and placement is also a work in progress. But at the end of the day, this is the traits guy that you take a risk on, in my opinion. I gave him a first-round grade. I said he's a scheme diverse pass rusher with all the athletic traits and just not a lot of refinement. He's going to struggle as a run defender early in his career, but he has a high ceiling as a pure pass rusher. And so he was number 2 overall for me. Mark, who's your comp for James Pierce?
There's if you want to share that screen right there. For me, it's Kayvon Thibodeau. He reminds me a ton coming out of college as a prospect of Kayvon Thibodeau, who's a direct RAS comp on the website there. And I feel like I'm actually just a lot higher on what Thibodeau is as a pro than a lot of people. I think some people want to label him as a bust. I think he's been in one of the worst situations imaginable and still put up some numbers, even if he's had some bad moments. But James Pierce is my number 3 overall player. I love James Pierce. So the fact that every PFF mock you do, even though he's ranked like 12th or whatever it is, he falls to the 30s. It is unbelievable to me. It almost like breaks the mock draft simulator for me. So it's not fun to do mock drafts for teams that need edges because I'm just going to take James Pierce in the first round every time. I'm so much higher on his rush defense than I think the general consensus is. I think he's one of the better run defenders at the edge position in this class. I think he's I think it comes down to, for me, I was told coming into the year that James Pierce was going to be like a contender for the first pick. And I think he was just as good, if not better, than he was the previous year. He had, he has 28 tackles for loss over the last 2 years, 18 sacks over the last 2 years, graded out as a better run defender this year than he did last year. I don't get it. Like, I don't get why this guy's fallen. If it's the only answer I'm willing to even understand is what we've been hearing, is that he's a crazy person allegedly off the field and hasn't handled the interviews or the draft process well. And, you know, I can't speak to all that. It's again, like, it's kind of like when we have injury concerns. I'm not a doctor. I'm also not a private investigator to try to figure out, you know, I'm not Big Dom basically to go and tell you exactly who these people are character wise, but he's, you know, he would be my dream, not only at 32, but to trade up for. He really, in my opinion, would be the perfect Eagle at target in the first round. And if Big Dom gives him the pass and, you know, passes the character check, I trust it.
Yeah, we got a comment from Abhay on Twitter here that says, if he passes our off-field filters, whatever those are, Big Dom, I'm on board. So there's James Pierce Jr. Before we get into the next guy, I want to shout out this comment from Krabby Oldman. It said, I never used to pay attention to off-season stuff, but watching you break this stuff down, I'm learning a ton. This is awesome. Shout out to Krabby. Thanks for joining in on another one of our streams on a random night. It's not our normal night, so always appreciate you chiming in. So let's keep rolling here. I'm going to talk about a guy. He's number 3 for me. He's number 5 for Dibes, and he's number 9 for Mark. It is Mike Green out of Marshall. And there's some caveats with Mike Green that we need to talk about. And we're going to talk about the on-field stuff. And because, like Mark said, we're not in a position to know some of these things, but I'll mention it just so it's on your radar. He was a 3-star recruit coming out of high school. He has a wrestling background. He went to UVA and had minimal playing time in 2021 before being suspended for the 2022 season for undisclosed reasons. Then he transferred to Marshall in 2023 and broke out in 2024 with 17 sacks and 23 tackles for loss while being named an All-American. Now, it's come out since that he was accused of sexual assault at UVA, which is what led to the suspension and later the transfer. And then once that started to come out, things also came out about him being accused of sexual assault in high school as well. And so, again, not a private investigator. That's not my place, but there's character red flags out there that you need to be aware of and the teams are certainly asking him about. I'm not going to try to pontificate on that because I just don't know. So I'll talk about what I see on the field. And that's a 6'3", 251. Didn't test enough to get a relative athletic score, but he was 7th in pressure rate, 1st in sack rate, and 1st in defensive stop rate in 2024 when he had 23 tackles for loss and 17 sacks at Marshall. And he's a very good athlete. I don't know why he didn't test because he's an awesome athlete. He probably would have tested well. He wins in space with speed, agility, body control, you name it. He has a quick first step off the line and he doesn't slow down. He has very good counter moves that he employs effectively. He keeps offensive tackles guessing. He takes the openings they give him and their stance and technique. He is bendy around the edge. He chases plays down from the backside when he's left unblocked. And so he's got a lot going for him on the field. That said, he is small, undersized. He's 47th percentile height, 31st percentile weight. His arms are average-ish, probably 32 inches. I do think he struggles to play through contact, and he lacks the power to threaten to rush through an offensive tackle's chest. And if an offensive tackle doesn't have to worry about you rushing through his chest, it makes it a lot easier for him to defend your speed and your counter moves. So he doesn't have the strength to anchor in the run game. He often tries to duck blocks, and he ends up washed out of gaps. So I gave him a first-round grade. I said he is a stand-up pass rusher / pass rushing specialist, in my opinion. And there's obviously room for those guys to go in the first round, but a lot is going to depend on how he interviews with teams and what they find out about all the allegations off the field. Not a guy that I want on my team, if we're being honest, but I do like what I saw from him on the field. So does anybody have anything they want to add in on Mike Green?
With his wingspan and stuff, I think you can cross him off your Eagles big board.
Yeah, I do not. I would be shocked if the Eagles were to draft him.
It sucked too because I remember he had a lot of hype heading into the Senior Bowl. I didn't watch a lot of Marshall, and I was excited to get to know him. He has some fun tape if you watch it, but I don't know how much of it is translatable. And given how much the Eagles love traits and explosiveness, and I don't know, I feel it with the character concerns. You could probably just take him off your list.
Yeah, the size, the traits, the character concerns. I don't think he looks as dominant enough as I would like a guy that's coming out of Marshall to look on tape. There's obviously a lot of positives there, but I think all of that combined with me not being quite as high, it seems, on him as others, has kind of driven him down my list a little.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. So, okay, well, let's keep rolling. And finally, at number 1, guys, we're all in agreement. We see a guy the same.
Here's the debate, though, based on something we said pre-show.
Yeah, we're gonna get into it. Let's talk Abdul Carter out of Penn State. Number 1 on all of our boards. He's a 4-star recruit coming out of high school. Started 6 games as a true freshman at Penn State before becoming a full-time starter as a sophomore. He transitioned from hybrid linebacker to edge rusher in 2024. And it was a bit of a slow start, but he broke out with 12 sacks and 24 tackles for loss en route to earning first-team All-American honors. He's 21 years old, 6'3", 250 pounds, didn't complete athletic testing at the combine, ranked 4th in pressure rate, 5th in sack rate, and 4th in defensive stop rate. Abdul Carter is highly athletic. He explodes out of his stance. He corners well. He's got great lateral agility. He has a really nice rip and dip move, but he can also counter inside with a spin move. He's got versatility. I think you could use him as a dropper. He had 437 coverage reps in 3 years at Penn State. And then I don't know if this is a positive or a negative, honestly, but his late switch to edge rusher means he lacks technical refinement and he wins more with body control and athleticism. And so that's a positive in that it gives him a lot of room to grow as he learns the position better, but it's a negative because, like, if I'm going to draft the guy number 1 overall, I would like him to be a little more technically refined. And so you can view that however you want to. He is a high motor player. I don't think he's as good of a run defender. He struggles to deconstruct blocks, and when you add on top of that his smaller stature, I think it could limit his early down potential early on until he either bulks up or he refines his technique or both. He'll get caught out by pullers pretty frequently. He's got poor recognition of those, I think, and he needs to add more tools to the tool bag as a pass rusher. His hands aren't great. He's overly reliant on that speed and athleticism because he's still learning how to be an edge rusher. So I gave him a 1st-round grade. I said he's a designated pass rusher who will have to grow into rundown responsibilities. Has a sky-high ceiling, but might not splash right away in the NFL. I think he would fit best as a stand-up outside linebacker in an odd front. But the thing we're debating about that Mark referenced earlier is I expected Abdul Carter to be like a blue chip guy in the draft based off what I had heard people say about him. And I watched him, and if he was in last year's class, he would be edge 3 for me. I would have had him behind Jared Verse, and I would have had him behind Leatu Latu. So give him a 1st-round grade. I'm very comfortable taking him with the top 10 pick, but I don't think he's like the blue chip generational number 1 overall edge rusher that at least I feel like a lot of people were talking about him as. So, Mark, you said he would have been edge 1 for you last year, correct?
Yeah, he's my number 2 overall guy. And I looked at it. I just pulled it up. I had Latu, Dallas Turner, and Jared Verse 9, 10, 11. So I had them kind of all grouped together. I do think Carter's a blue chip guy. I actually wasn't as high on Carter halfway through the year when he started really getting talked about as a top 3, top 5 pick. I kind of was pointing to the production and maybe kind of shrugging my shoulders that he wasn't quite there as terms of me, comparing him to blue chip prospects of the past. But then down the stretch, I thought he turned it on. And, even when he was banged up in that Notre Dame game in the playoffs, he took over that game. He was the best player on that field on either side of the ball. And I really think that he went a long way for me kind of bumping him to being a true blue chip guy down the stretch. And wait, a Penn State defensive player with a ton of talent, and they put him at the wrong position. They utilized him incorrectly. Sounds like someone who might be currently getting in Twitter arguments with DeMarcus Lawrence, who plays for the Dallas Cowboys. So, yeah, that's my comp. I think it's hard to go away from the Parsons comp if you are high on Abdul Carter. I've seen Von Miller thrown out there as well. I don't think he's as refined as Von Miller was, but Parsons is a guy who didn't play a ton of edge in college. And I think that there's a lot of similarities with Carter where maybe he's not quite as refined as an edge rusher, but I think you see the upside and that there's no ceiling on the guy in terms of how good he can be, I think, at that position. So coaching will matter to get him to be like a true all pro that I think he has a potential to be. But he would have been my edge one for sure last year. I'm trying to think overall where he would have slotted in. I think it would have been 6 or 7 overall, right? Either in front of or after Jaden Daniels. He would have been 6 or 7 overall for me last year, and he's 2 overall, which kind of shows, I am a little lower on this year's draft than last. But yeah, this guy's a stud. I think he should probably be the first pick.
Yeah, probably. He should probably be the number 1 overall pick. I just don't think I think it's more of a statement on like this draft class as a whole than it is that like he's awesome and he's good. I said he's a red chip player for me. Like I expect him to go top 5 and I got no problem with that. I just didn't think he was quite as good as I expected him to be based on the way people were talking. Dives, what are your thoughts on Abdul Carter?
Yeah, I think he's blue chip all the way. I've always been a big fan of his. I see LeVar Arrington, off-ball linebacker and rundowns, pass rusher on pass downs, and his athleticism is elite. His versatility is elite. And the fact that he's just still learning the game and that ceiling, he might have the highest upside in this draft right there with Will Johnson. So absolutely blue chip.
All right.
It's not fair that Dives has Will Johnson 1 overall. I thought that was going to be I was going to be the only person in the industry that had Will Johnson 1, and someone on the damn podcast I do has Will Johnson 1 overall too. No, I'm joking. There's room for company with Will Johnson, but like I said, like Will Johnson's my number 1 overall guy. I think if I had the number 1 pick, I'd probably take Abdul Carter. Like just there's a positional value thing there, and I think. I could be mistaken, but I think it's a bigger need for Tennessee at edge than corner. But that's another show. That's a different topic.
All right. Well, there you have it, guys. Our top 10, I'll repeat them here from 1 to 10. I have Abdul Carter, James Pierce Jr., Mike Green, Princely Umanmielen, JTT, Landon Jackson, Nick Scorton, Mykel Williams, Shamar Stewart, and Donovan Ezraku. Mark from 1 to 10 has Abdul Carter, James Pierce Jr., Landon Jackson, Princely Umanmielen, Jack Sawyer, JTT, Nick Scorton, Donovan Ezraku, Mike Green, and Mykel Williams. And then Dibes from 1 to 10 has Abdul Carter, Nick Scorton, James Pierce Jr., Mykel Williams, Mike Green, Shamar Stewart, Landon Jackson, Princely Umanmielen, Donovan Ezraku, and Braden Swinson. I got to take a lot deeper breath to do that than I do when I repeat our top 5s. But there you have it. Our top 10 edge rushers. I know that you guys watched more than 10 edge rushers. I watched 16 of them to make my rankings. And sometimes there's just a guy that you couldn't fit into your top 10 that you want to give a shout out to. So I'll open the floor here. Dives, is there anybody you want to give an honorable mention shout out to before we get out of here?
Quick, fun day 2 guy, Josiah Stewart out of Michigan. If you're looking for explosiveness, not a big guy. He's only 6 foot tall. But man, the bend, the pass rushing upside, his numbers were outstanding, right up there with the best of them. I think he's a guy that fits Vic Fangio's scheme really well as a linebacker, edge tweener, just a guy that brings chaos and can put as a chess piece in this Eagles defense. So keep an eye out on Josiah Stewart, who I like a lot.
Yeah. 5th in pressure rate, 3rd in sack rate, 2nd in defensive stop rate, and a 7th percentile height. All right. Mark, anybody you want to give an honorable mention shout out to?
Yeah, I feel like I always have like a day 3 guy who I fall in love with and I end up having as like a early third round grade on. This year for me, that's Tyler Barron from Miami. I've kind of fallen in love with him. He is he's ranked 153 on PFF. He's probably like outside of their top 25 edge rushers, and I have him as 11th. Like I think that he's a really interesting guy. He's 16 sacks over the last 2 years with 59 pressures. He also had a 9.32 relative athletic score. He's 6'4.5". He's graded out well on the explosive drills. Ran a 4.62, which is in the 95th percentile there for edge rushers. His RAS comps on there are unbelievable for Tyler Barron, Javon Curse, Max Crosby, Jalen Phillips. Like there's unbelievable RAS comps for Tyler Barron. And he had production, and it was at Miami. It's not like it was at some low level. I think this guy should go on day 2. I really like him.
All right. So there you have it, everybody. That is our marathon on edge rushers. And if you didn't get enough of the draft this week, you can tune in tomorrow night. It'll be around 8:45 or 9 o'clock Eastern. We're going to go live with our top 5 linebackers. Ryan should be back with us for that one. So we're going to dive into some linebackers. We're going to have a conversation about one of the top linebackers and if he's actually a linebacker. And so that'll be a lot of fun. So be sure you are tuned into that. Be sure you're following these guys on Twitter. Dibes is at Mr. Crockpot. Mark is at Mark Henry Jr. I am at Shane Half NFL. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast feed, Eagles Pin Pull Network, wherever you get your podcasts. Keep it tuned, guys. We'll have a Birds of the Round Table tomorrow night. Another Armchair Scouts. Lots of content coming your way over the rest of the week. And over the next month, guys, we are a month out from the draft, which feels insane. But we got a few position groups to get through. So you guys stay locked in here. We will cover every position group, excluding kickers and punters, because there's always that one smart aleck that's like wanting me to watch punter film.
Always.
We will cover all of the important positions in the lead up to the draft. So keep it tuned right here. We'll catch you guys next time.